Hey everybody, welcome back to 32 All the Way with Doc. Actually, our 50th episode. Yay! We're gonna
Yeah.
start. Yeah, you know what I mean. Hey, lucky for
Yeah.
you, my friend.
Yeah.
like
Lucky me.
like to say, we have a sponsor. We're gonna start putting it up in the videos and stuff. Beyond the Leash Dog Training. My friends Melissa Riley and Eric Straitmans in Mississauga, Ontario, have known we've known Eric for well over 25 years. He has about 25 years experience in the business. If you are in that area and you want to do something with your animals, he is the guy to go to. You'll absolutely love the way him and his partner Melissa take care of the animals, and hopefully we can have them on sometime in the future, because Eric factors hugely into my own books, my series of books. Today, though, we have Mr. James Reid. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, really great to be here.
We are going to be talking mainly about Diamond Estate, an epic fantasy adventure. We can go back and look at some of your other books, but this is the one that came up when I was doing the research on you. Is this the newest one, or
It's the first book of my newest series that I published.
it's the first one of the newest series?
Between April and July of this year.
So how long are you looking for this series to go?
Well, it's all out. All 5 books are out, but it's sort of like part of its own greater meta series of books all set in the same sort of universe and with
Great
characters, some different characters.
So even when this series is done, we might see these people pop up somewhere else?
Oh, definitely are going to see them pop up.
Oh, great.
They already, like in my next series, they pop up a bit.
So am I pronouncing the character's name properly, Oben?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So to escape his dark mysteries, Oben must wield his magical blade again. Life has gone wrong for Oben. Once a respected palace guard, he now sells his sword as a bandit. Trapped by his mistakes, he has no hope. Until one young woman sees more in him. Avina, passionate and headstrong, has no patience for bullies. Dedicated to healing, she struggles to escape her own bleak past. In Oben, she sees a chance for them both to escape. In Cash, a city of poverty and vice, the two must find trust in the other to protect those that they care about. Dark sorcerers, underworld crime bosses, and brutal bandits scheme to use and destroy them. I was kind of interested right away when I started reading this to get ready for your to interview you, because this sounds a lot like my book series, just based a couple hundred years in different ways. So give us a little rundown. What exactly is? I don't want to tell too much of the story, but
yeah.
Why is Oben such a mess?
All right, so Oben is a character I created years ago in a short story called Duel, D-U-A-L. No, and he's not the main character. The main character was a prince named Tame, and the two of them fight a duel over a woman, and this is his dark past. So they go out on the sand. So the prince, it's his woman, and he saw, Oben. He thinks he saw him sexually assault her, but in reality, they were like having an affair behind his back. Okay. And so the prince is thinking he's out there to avenge her honor and duel this guy who, he thinks, laid hands on his woman. And Oben is not happy at all to be called a rapist. So and he thinks that this is his girl and the prince is like forcing her to marry him. So the girl's lying to them both.
Okay, right? So she's lying to both sides.
She's lying to both of them, right?
Okay.
Isn't that so they both are there under the wrong impression. So they get on the dueling sands, and Tame, he's our prince. He is hopelessly inept with the sword. He's going to get his ass kicked. Can I swear on this?
Sorry. Absolutely.
Okay, so he knows it though, and he's like, maybe something will happen, but he can't let it go. And then an earthquake hits, and they get dropped into the mines below the city, and now have to work with each other to get out of it. And over the course of that, they talk about what's going on, and the truth kind of comes out as they both sort of learn who this woman is. And Tame kind of comes to the realization, like, okay, this isn't the girl I thought it was. And they get out, and he's like, okay, I got to probably, end things. But Oben, he can't let her go. He's loved this girl all his life. And even though she's was playing with him, and basically scheming to make herself like queen, and he kills Tame. And that's his sin. 2 years later, he's broken by this. He was once a really great, honorable guy. And in this moment of, desperate passion, he did a horrible thing. And it's destroyed his sense of himself, and he is now at rock bottom. He's a bandit. He sees no hope. He just sort of goes through life. He's a hired sword, and he sees, he's literally at his rock bottom, and there's one guy in the bandit group, Karsten, who's ever decent to him, who like jokes with him, tries to pull him out of his darkness. And today Karsten is going to get badly wounded in a fight because Oben didn't care enough to even try to go in and like join the fight. He just sort of shuffled along with the others, and then his friend gets messed up, and that's kind of spurs some life into Oben, and he goes and fights the guy who did it, and he wins barely, almost with sort of a like not caring if he died. And now his friend's on the ground bleeding, and for the first time in his life he has a chance to save someone. And the other person that helps try to save him is Avina, who is the person that these bandits are there to capture, her and her employer, this guy named Dulena Scholar. And even though she just witnessed these guys kill her bodyguard, she sees one of their men on the ground. She's a healer, so she's going to help them, even though they try and they came there to capture them. And so the two of them start to bond over trying to save this guy's life, and that is where the story starts. And awesome. And Carson and so Oben kind of ends up basically becoming their new bodyguard, sort of to take the place of the guy he killed, and to help out his friend. And he's butts heads with his bandit leader over this because his bandit leader doesn't care that one of his guys might survive. He just wants to go get paid. And so, but anyways, this sort of starts Oben on his road to redemption. And that's what the series is that's one of the things the series is ultimately about, redemption, and, doing something, like, even if you did something terrible the day before, today you can do something better. Today you can make the world a better place. You can, that's kind of the theme. You can never, not improve yourself.
Okay. Well, I was what I wanted to ask about, what I was not amazed with, but intrigued with, I would say, is the whole idea of the bandits. Are we drawing on kind of an Eastern Ronin idea, or are these guys all basically working for themselves, and it's a convenient thing to be? So
they work for a greater criminal syndicate called the Brotherhood, and the Brotherhood wants to basically use Dulan's research for their own purposes. So they kind of sent the bandits in to basically bring him to their leader, and so they can talk. But so the setting is kind of like Victorian England. So there's a magic system involving jewels that they use as to power machinery. They call them jewel sheens. And they're kind of in their sort of they've kind of like, this is like lost technology from like 3,000 years ago. And when there was a grand, like, civilization, that sort of thing, and it all collapsed in a great calamity. And now they're kind of like relearning it, and they've kind of hit their technical, their industrial revolution is kind of going on in Cash. And so it's a great political and economic upheaval. You have like the old monarchy, meeting in with like ideas of democracy. You have, the exploitation of the poor by factory workers. And so Cash is kind of all just sort of a broiling mess on the sort of a very like moment of history. And so the bandits are just kind of like, they're like highwaymen, they're just sort of out there robbing merchants and stuff, for this greater criminal syndicate that is one of the two of them that kind of control crime in this country.
Yeah, I find it fascinating when you go back and look at crime from that era, is that, and I mean, I'm a huge crime buff. It's what my series is about. If I turn the camera on here, every book about, whatever kind of crime faction you want to look at. I just find that if we go back 100 or 200 years, the old cliche now is, it's just a job. Just the only difference is they break the law, where it seems like it was a bigger segment of society back then.
Yeah.
Where it seemed a little more, okay, you were a criminal, you probably weren't that great a guy because you were a criminal, but it seemed to be a little more accepting of doing that kind of work.
It's not necessarily accepting. Now we'll say Cash is kind of a really big city, and it does have like its own street gangs. I kind of model them off of like street gangs of like old New York City from like the 1800s.
Okay.
I even used their names. I went back into history and was like, just because they have some really great names for like street gangs.
Yeah, the Pug Uglies and all them. There's some fantastic names from that era.
So I took some of them and modified them a little bit to fit the city, but I kind of went with that sort of theme of like for the street gang. So there's like, so you have like the street gang crime, and you got like, so then you got a more like organized crime over it. That's kind of like, that's sort of running things behind the scenes. And Yeah.
So when we're talking the whole idea of the street level stuff, are we talking the old ideas from the 17th and 18th century where basically, that maybe 6 block unit or 6 block area, you were king, but once you went out
Yeah.
of there, none of
Yeah,
that mattered.
basically that.
Okay.
It's like little neighborhoods, like, every neighborhood in the slums anyways, in the more nicer parts of the town, you don't really have it, but in the slums, you have this neighborhood's controlled by these guys and this neighborhood's controlled by these guys, and they fight along their edges, and sometimes they ally, so it's a whole continuous fluid mess of basically young poor boys that don't have anything else to do, but that kind of fall into this, they're looking for something and there's nothing for them but these local crimes, that they take them in and mentor them, because they don't have fathers or whatever.
I think that aspect of crime, no matter when we're writing, if we're talking about your series, if we're talking modern day, I think that's why whenever we see, it's a big argument that I always talk to people whenever I do the interviews, everybody's history of the past or the future is either utopian or dystopian, right? You always have, things are perfect or things are horrible. And I think in that respect, there's always going to be some kind of crime for exactly the reason why you mentioned it. These guys with absolutely nothing, even if you can just get to exist, you're doing far better than all the guys underneath you. Yeah. And if you get that shot where you're the guy who runs it, well, I mean, most of them know they're probably only running it for a year or two, but that year or two is great compared to everything else. I really like that distinction. I was thinking about that when I was reading over my notes to talk about your book. That just this is a life for losers basically, unless you can really get that one shot.
Yeah.
All right. So what are the inspiration behind all this? Behind taking the crime ideas, behind taking all this and seeming to mix it into one area? Because you seem to have the whole bigger network organized idea, the street idea, the whole deal. Where is all this inspiration taken from to put this in an entire series?
So this goes back even further. So when I wanted to get into writing seriously, I wrote a short story called The Assassin's Remorse. And I wanted to write a story about an assassin that killed a woman. And then as she's dying, she says, like, I forgive you. And it totally throws him for a loop. And it causes him to go into sort of a mental spiral breakdown. And because he can't handle the fact that after all these people he killed, this one said her dying words were to forgive him. And so I wanted to set it sort of like in foggy, like Victorian London. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I want to have a magic system. So I thought of like, what if we use like jewels, but they use them as machine? And it was supposed to be just a one-off thing, right? So I created this whole like 7 jewels and sort of like they each associated with a color and an idea that's part of their religion. And then I just wrote this short story, and I thought that was going to be the end of it. People really liked the magic system, and people were like, you got to use this again. And so I was like, oh, cool. And so then I started coming up with other stories. So like in different parts of the world. So like I mentioned like in this story that there was this Tetherian woman. And at the time I was just like, Tetherian was just, she's a foreign woman from across the sea. And to the more like Victorian people, because they're kind of modeled after, Victorian England, they're very prim and proper, at least on the surface, right? And so she's very much a scandalous, free-spirited type of people. And so I was like, oh, all right, so what's over on the Eastern side? So I was like, well, let's take these jewel ideas and take them from sort of a Christian ethos and turn them into a more like Eastern like mythology, more spiritual or whatever. And so I created another story called Mutilated. And then I created Duel. And then I'm like, started building a world. And after I wrote Duel, I always wanted to write about what happened to Oben and the girl after they parted ways. I had ideas and I wanted to tell their story. And so I brought Oben all the way back over to this original setting where the Assassin's Remorse took place. And, and so like I already had this sort of Victorian England crime setting. And I thought he would be great for it because he's like this disgraced foreigner that would just sort of fall into this crime world. And then he would meet, and so it just seemed like a really good building block to tell the story and to set it all in this one city and kind of use like what's going on in the city, sort of drive the story. And because we have like the crime syndicate doing its thing, you got the crown trying to do its thing, and then you got our characters trying to do their thing, so it created a lot of avenues for conflict and storytelling.
So you were talking earlier about actually taking some of the names from those gangs and inserting it into the story. Is this a lot of research on your part, or did you just say, "This is the world I want to create. I've got these ideas," and then you put in your own rules behind
So I mean, I've spent, my entire life watching like history documentaries and stuff like that. So I've absorbed like stuff about, I've watched quite a number of like Jack the Ripper documentaries. So there's probably why I have this fondness for foggy,
it?
London. Probably is probably where that came from. And so it's not that I did much research. I just kind of used what I know about how gangs work. I don't think street level gangs have changed much. I mean, yeah, their weapons have changed and their names have changed and the technology they use has changed, but not like what drives, street gangs. That I don't think has ever changed. And it's
No,
really,
and again, that's what I was alluding to before. I think that's pretty well universal.
yeah,
You're looking for that little 3, 4, excuse me, maybe 6 block area where you guys are in charge.
yeah.
It's probably nothing. Excuse me, one second. It's probably nothing more than survival. It's not, anywhere near the idea of getting rich.
I just wanted to get some names that kind of sounded not modern. And so I was like, I'll see what like the gangs were like in the 1600s in New York City or whatever, and just use those as
I was,
just
I
the
was,
basis. So it wasn't much research. It more like I went to Wikipedia and like, oh, these are the names, and I was like, oh, these are cool, and they kind of gave me a sense of like how they named their street gangs back then. And I thought that was a good flavor.
I was just gonna say that would have been a great resource for it. After the movie came out, I wasn't a huge fan of the movie, but
Gangs and names, yeah, that's actually where the idea came for me to go look.
yeah,
They had some interesting names for gangs in that, like the Dead Rabbits.
yeah. Well, I gone back and read the book and then researched some material on that one. And like a lot of other movies, they said, as far as the violence, they had to really tone it down. They said because people don't realize how brutally violent that era is, because it's only a couple hundred years ago if you think about it.
I don't think modern people understand how brutally violent the past was. I think the farther removed we get from like agriculture and like killing animals on a regular basis, I think the more people, like humans, used to really do some horrible things to each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Not even that long ago.
And like I said, I think people always think the timeline shifts once you get into my personal view is always like the early 1800s, maybe the 1850s, or some of those gangs were absolutely brutal. There was no like conscience whatsoever.
No, you can just look to like the Mexican cartels to see like level of violence exists today.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because a lot of people have said that as well, and I said like none of those theories or none of those forms of torture are new whatsoever. It's just they were brought back into style, and what was happening. I'm in Canada, and I know it here in the 90s. When the Hells Angels wanted to fight in the province of Quebec, they stopped fighting each other long enough to start killing judges and cops. And their whole idea was that it was going to destabilize the system, and people were horrified. And everybody said, "Man, like look all over Mexico, look all over even parts of Spain, Guadalajara. This is you don't go after each other. You go after the power base. So there's no one there to deal with you anymore."
Yeah,
it's just fascinating. Should anybody start right at the beginning with this? I know this seems like a kind of innocuous question, but I always like to ask: do any of the books stand alone, or would we be better starting right from the beginning?
You need to start from the beginning.
Okay.
They all build on each other. The series takes place only over a year, and it's all telling one overarching story. Although the first 2 books are more standalone, and they get more not standalone from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th books. Kind of flow one from the other.
That's amazing. It really is. Anything else you'd like to add for us? What I usually do is when we put the video out, I'll have all the links and stuff on the bottom. Everybody's more than happy to go check all these things out. But we'll definitely start with the main one with the diamond stains. Anything else that you'd like to tell them about that they should be going to look at?
Yeah, I mean it's got some great characters. It's there's other stuff going on. I got a shapeshifter in the series that's kind of like causes issues. There's, like I said, there's the necromancer. So this has definitely got fantasy in it for those people who are worried that it is definitely fantasy. There's definitely magic going on. There's a lot of different factions, but ultimately though, it's really about these 2 characters, Oben and Adina, and their story. kind of helping each other, you know, kind of at first like helping each other get over their past, and then later kind of trying to help this city that's in turmoil.
That's awesome, man. Like I said, you know what? It really sounds interesting. And I was saying before how I like to do all these interviews and I like to have just about everybody on because even though I might not be interested in it, for the first time, I don't know, maybe just because I was saying it's the 50th or whatever, for the first time, I'm seriously interested in somebody's book that they sent me. Not trying to insult anybody else, but just the whole way you have a position and then all the crime gangs and stuff. It sounds super fascinating. James, I thank you so much for your time. We're gonna sign off, and then
it was great.
It was so nice meeting you, everybody. Thank you from Doc and 32 all the way. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, bye.